Good morning. I'm Arlene Sacks, and I wrote a book called Moving Forward, The Widow's Journey. So I've been writing books, these kinds of books, like the one I'm going to share with you today, for maybe 6 years. Prior to that, I wrote academic books. So what I'm going to share with you today is what it's like to be moving forward after becoming a widow. And I'm not really dealing too much with grieving. I'm dealing with how one moves forward. But basically, I have sort of a little bit of a funny story. It may not be so funny, but the last university I worked at was an online university, and I was there for about 30 years. And when you're online, people live all over the country. And our university was based in Cincinnati, Ohio. So 3 or 4 times a year, they had to bring us in for meetings. And we would have meetings all day, but then in the evening, you could have dinner with whomever you chose. So I would have dinner with different colleagues each night that I was in Cincinnati. And one of the colleagues with whom I had dinner, he said to me, after about 1.5 years after my husband died, he said, "You know, Arlene, you've been a widow now 1.5 years." And it was very thoughtful, intellectual, spiritual person. However, after about 1.5 years, we're having this dinner, and he says, "You know, it might be time for us to have a conversation that isn't about academics, but is about you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "It might be time for you to do 2 things. One, to move on, and the other, to maybe think about selling your house." Now, let me share with you, these are the 2 things you never tell someone who's a widow. I don't care if they're a month or 10 years. These don't say. Because we're not silly. I was not about to move on and leave my husband somewhere, because I didn't know where I was leaving him. He was gone. That was not in my ability. And the other was, why would I want to get rid of my house unless there was a reason financially that you have to get rid of your house? And then, of course, I have great respect for that. But in your house, if you choose to stay in it 6 months, 6 years, 16 years, 11, if you choose to stay in your house, you do that because it's got your history, stories, memories, all that. And that helps you keep going. When it's time for you to sell, you'll know. So I went through and I was being very polite. And I said, "Well, thank you," and then changed the conversation. He did it again a little while later. He said, "Let me go back to blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Okay, Arlene, be polite. You are the head of this program, and he's running a program. You have to, be smart." But by the 3rd time, like baseball, 3 strikes and you're out, I said, "This stops now." And he's very quiet, like I said, highly intellectual. And I said, "These are not good things to tell me. These are not good things to tell any widow." And I wasn't really nice about it because I sort of, was angry, but I didn't want to act angry. And he got very quiet. And I don't know if you know how long 1.5 to 2 minutes is in a restaurant when nobody's speaking and you're just looking at each other. It's a very long time. So he said, "You know, Arlene, you may never be able to move on, but I bet you can move forward." Because that's something I knew how to do. I had moved forward my entire life. That I could get. And then if you see underneath it says The Widow's Journey, it's because my editors said moving forward means a lot of things today. So we've got to put something on it that tells what the book is about. And that's how this became the cover. I'm going to describe what I feel, and these are just all my thoughts in this book, minus the 13 women I ended up interviewing about this, which I'll share later. But I feel that widowhood in that experience is like a train ride. And I will read that to you, just a few paragraphs. The best way I can describe the process of moving forward after losing someone so close to you is by comparing the process to a train ride. When you envision a train, you can picture a long line of separate compartments. Life moves forward from the last compartment to the first. As you progress in life, you slowly move from one car to the next, eventually shutting the door to the previous compartment and becoming content in the next one, until it's time to move forward. That moving forward, letting go of one door and stretching for the next one, often shakes every part of you. I'm sure for those of you who have gone from one train compartment to another train compartment, know there's a platform in between, and when the train is moving, it's like going, well, that's what moving from one compartment to another is as a widow, you know? And we know. So I will share that when I lost the love of my life, I was keenly aware of every single movement, often as if it were in slow motion. I chose to open the door and reach for the next compartment until seeing the compartments behind me, but moving forward to the next one on my own. I feel comfort in knowing I can always look back, see and remember everything in those compartments. Well, I know there is so much more to do in the one ahead of me. So that's sort of a way that I move forward and the way many do. I mentioned to you about leaving my home. And we lived in that home for maybe 35 years. And when you have a home, we have very strange art. So I'm going to start by saying that. I own a carousel horse. I own a huge French sign, which I'll tell you about in a minute. I own a bronze sculpture of Midas. I own branches that I got out of a dumpster. And so I'm going to share a little bit of those purchases with you so you'll know. And there are pictures of them in the book. So the first one I'll tell you about is carousel horse. When I was little, I went on merry-go-rounds and carousels, and there happened to be one near where I lived. And I loved them. And when I got married, we collected whatever we could from antique places, etc. So one time I said to my husband, you know, I really want a carousel horse. And he was very good at accommodating some of the things I wanted, which other people wouldn't. And we looked around, and carousel horses were very expensive. So there was, and sure enough, we we're in Maine for some reason on a vacation, and we passed this couple on their terrace, and they're on their terrace, and we see maybe 40 carousel horses as well as other animals, because in Europe they don't just have horses, they have pigs and they have chickens and they have roosters and all like what we have. And so we call up to those people who are on their terrace and we say, are these for sale? And it didn't take long, because we were from the 60s, to realize they were as high as could be. And they said, come back in the morning, come back in the morning. Oh, okay. So we come back in the morning, and the prices were a tenth of what a regular one would be. So sure enough, we got the carousel horse, and it's in my house. Then we were on vacation, because we took sort of small types of vacation in those years. And we're in, I don't know how many of you have been to Montreal, which is like going to Paris, because you have French all over the place, but you don't have to go over the pond again. So we went to Montreal, and we go past Montreal to Quebec, which is more French. And then you go past that to a very romantic area called Charlevoix. In Charlevoix, they're really speaking French. So there's an ice cream place. Now, I love ice cream, always did. So there's an ice cream place, and my husband says, you want ice cream? I said, do I ever turn down ice cream? That's never going to happen. Well, I didn't realize they use real cream up there. So the ice cream is unbelievable. He gets his cone, I get my cone, we have our ice cream. He looks at me, goes, I want another one. I said, okay. So now we have 2 ice cream cones. Now I'm like up to here. And he says to me, I hate to do this to you, but I want another one. And now I'm, no, you can't have another ice cream. It's ridiculous. They're big and they're full of cream. That's why they're so good. And he says, no, I want another one. And we're like having this argument about a third ice cream. I said, well, then there's no dinner tonight. There's no dinner. And this is the ridiculousness of the argument. Well, all of a sudden we hear bang, bang, bang. And I look up and he looks up and there's a gentleman on a ladder putting up a sign for the new ice cream place. But in Montreal and North, they don't put signs like with flashing lights and everything. They carve in beautiful wood. In this case, it was ice cream. So it had, if you know what relief is, it's like sort of pushed out from the wood. And so there's a beautiful ice cream cone that comes down, and there's all kinds of pretty things. I mean, it's spectacular. And my husband looked at me, he said, I get it already. I know what's going to go on. So I said, okay. So off we go. And he goes and speaks to the gentleman. And he says, do you make this for things other than a store? Do you craft this? And the gentleman said, oh, yes, I have a portfolio. So they go sit in his truck. And about 20, 30 minutes later, they come back. And there's a sketch. And it says, La Cuisine de Arlene, which is Arlene's kitchen. So when I pass in my house, my kitchen, and there's my sign, Cuisine de Arlene, there's Howard walking right with me. Then I have another one. Oh, because some of the stories I'll tell you, you see, not every marriage is perfect, which is what my second book is about. So now we're on vacation. We're in New York for July 4th weekend. And we always went July 4th weekend because everybody leaves New York City in July. So you can really get around. That's very good. So we're walking in the art area, and there in a window is a bronze statue of a Midas. So it's this crotchety old man with money hanging from him. It's all in bronze, nothing moves. The ticketed, and my husband looks at it, he goes, oh, I love that. And I actually didn't love it, but okay. And we go in, and I said, just think about it. If you want it, you can always order it. It's not a one of a kind. So we go home, and about 2 weeks later, he calls me up from his office, and he says, I bought this statue. And I said, oh, I don't say anything because he already bought it. And I said, you bought the statue? I have pictures of these in my book because it's so funny. I can't describe the crotchety old man as well as I should. But I said, you bought it? And he said, yes, I wanted it. You said, but I said, oh, okay. Dead silence. And he says, well, you don't seem to be happy. I said, it has nothing to do with the statue. It's the fact that up till this point, we bought things together. At least we had a conversation. We didn't have a conversation. You bought it. So now I use the Arlene brain. I don't have all these degrees because I don't know what to say after a while, as long as I have a few minutes to get it together. And so I said, well, now that I see that it's really okay not to have a conversation and do it together, then I'll know what to do the next time, me. But I'm glad you got something you wanted. Hang up. Comes home from work, because I get home earlier because I leave earlier in the morning. So I get home and he walks in and I've got dinner, etc. And he says, I canceled the order. And I said, but you really like that. He goes, but I don't want to do something that's, not right. So I said, well, you did, so I appreciate it. But this was like the fall, because we saw it in July, was in the fall. And then what happened was his birthday was in April. So of course I saved my little money, and of course I ordered it for him, and it came on his birthday. And he said to me, well, I guess it really wasn't about the statue. And I said, good guess. He said, it was about us. I said, yes. It was never about the statue. And the last one I'll tell you about is about branches and a dumpster. So we go out for, I think we had Italian food that night, and it was in Miami, where I live, and it was in a circular area where all the restaurants use the same parking area and, I guess, trash dumpsters. So as I'm getting in the car, I look over, and there's a big dumpster, and in the dumpster are these giant branches. And I know it was January because they were part of holiday, they were white and silver, and they were part of the holiday decorations. So I look, I go, those branches are perfect. So my husband looks at me, he goes, they're in the trash. I said, I know, but I have 3 vases that I've been sitting with to find the right thing, and those branches will be great, and we'll spray paint them. He said, but that means I have to go into the dumpster, and this was before there was dumpster diving, didn't exist. He goes, and get them out. I said, don't worry, I'll help. So the poor guy goes into the dumpster, which is by restaurants, so you can imagine what's in the dumpster, and ecology was not the goal at the time, every piece of whatever food. So he's in the dumpster, pushing it out, and I'm like over the side of the dumpster grabbing it. Now, what would you like me to do? Get rid of those branches? Never. And that's how the house has all these memories. Of course, we have normal things too, but a lot of what we have is not. So I wanted to share that with you so that you'll understand what it's like for some people to have to sell, not have to, but choose to sell before they're ready. When the time comes, I'll know the right time. So for example, and I let everybody help me. That's the one thing I knew. I knew how to ask for help, and I knew I let people help me. Because I knew eventually, I'm a pretty tough girl from a pretty tough city, and we get through things. So I knew eventually I'd get through things, but not then. So I had 3 girlfriends who actually sat with me the night Howard passed away, and these 3 women stayed with me throughout till they didn't need me, I didn't need them. One understood that one of my choices, I'm not going to go into them, but I made 3 really strange choices once he died. And one was to wear black for a year. Second one was somebody with whom I worked. She drove me to work. She brought me home from work. She took me to LA Fitness. She took me to yoga. She just made sure I got out in a certain way. And the third one, whose name is Daisy, was my husband's, shall we say, work wife. She took care of everything. She took care of him knowing, because we always knew he wouldn't get better. So she took care of him, helping him, and then afterward helped me. So those 3 women helped me. Just help me transition. So what do you say about other people? All these people. And everyone did something. So the point is, all these people are there, and many, many more. Many, many more. I will leave you, I do have something I want to end, because now you're like part of my little group. About 3 weeks before Howard died, he turned to me, using his elbow to prop himself up, and put his hand under his chin. "Please do not forget me," he said. I looked at him and replied, in my usual humorous and loving way, "Are you insane? That could never happen." Now, no one who hears about or reads this book will forget him either. So thank you for sharing, and I'm so glad you're here. Oh, you're very kind. It's a privilege. It's a privilege. It really is.